Ginny Cosola, invested in you.
The following program is sponsored by the Medicine Center Pharmacies. You're listening to News Talk 1480 WHBC and Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. Now here's your host, Paul White.
Good morning and welcome to Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. I'm your pharmacist, Paul White. We're glad you joined us. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Mercy Medical Center and Studio Arts and Glass, and of course, our socially distant technical producer, J.D. DeAngelis. We continue our shows from our administrative offices and wish our friends at WHBC and our listening audience continued good health. Our guests today are Dr. Mitchell Hout, MD, a hematology specialist and medical oncologist from Mercy Hematology and Oncology Associates, and Joan Kaufman, registered nurse, clinical trials nurse. Dr. Hout and Joan, welcome to the show and thanks for joining us. We're looking forward to talking to you today.
Thank you for having us.
Enrolling in a clinical trial can be an important option for patients with cancer. For some patients, taking part in a clinical trial may be the best treatment choice. By participating in clinical trials, patients are also helping to advance new knowledge and treatments that will help future generations. This morning, we're going to share information that you may find helpful if you're considering enrolling in a clinical trial. We'd like to remind our listeners that our program is available each week on our podcast. You can subscribe to it just by going to your favorite app in the podcast store and looking for Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy.
So Dr. Hout, welcome to the show again, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
So I'm a hematologist and medical oncologist. I've worked in Canton, Ohio now for the past 25 years, basically the majority of my career. I did my hematology oncology training at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine and its affiliated hospitals back in the late 1980s. And I've been involved with enrolling patients and conducting clinical trials at Mercy Medical Center for the duration of time I've been here in Canton. And, you know, it's continues to be exciting. It's the newest therapies and diagnostics, and it's something that in the last few years has really seemed to have escalated in numbers of patients and new discoveries.
So, and Joan, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Thanks for asking. I'm Joan Kaufman. I am one of the oncology certified nurses here at Mercy Medical Center in Canton, Ohio. Here in our cancer department, I work as a clinical research nurse coordinator. And I've been at Mercy for over the past 10 years. Prior to that, I have spent several years working in private oncology practices. So you could say I've spent my whole working career in oncology. When I came to Mercy, it was one of my interests to bring clinical trials locally to our community, and we've seen expansion here, and so that's just what I'm passionate about.
So, Doctor, what are clinical trials? A lot of people don't know, and how important are they to cancer care?
So clinical trials are essential to cancer care. Just about any therapy that we give today has been the result of clinical trials efforts. So clinical trials is really the method by which we determine the safety and effectiveness of primarily new therapies and diagnostics to determine that they're clinically relevant and useful. Of course, safety and effectiveness are of paramount importance. We're also interested in side effects, cost, convenience, all, and a variety of other issues, quality of life issues, all of which may be evaluated through a clinical trial. When a new drug is in development, there are multiple questions that come up as to how to best use the drug and which patients will it work best in and be most useful in. And so it's really the clinical trials process that helps move that forward. Generally, every clinical trial that's done locally and for the most part around the country, I should say, is going to be well organized. Typically, it's laid out in advance what the goals are, what the trial is trying to accomplish, how many patients will be necessary, what the early stopping rules may be, and so forth. And all of this has to be approved ahead of time through multiple layers of reassurance, if you will.
So prior to clinical trials, and I remember this from my university, my college years, we toured some drug companies. And the one company in particular, which is no longer around, had a whole string of animals that they pre-tested all these new drugs on. Does that sort of thing still occur before they get to human clinical trials?
So, yeah, I mean, we're not really involved with that much. That certainly is something that happens. So new drug is developed and, it starts through cancer cell lines. And it's, this is mostly laboratory portions of the development of a new drug or therapy. And then they often will do this through tumor xenografts, which refer to where tumors are actually grown in some animal models. Often it's mice that are involved, and that sort of thing. Most of that work is just to get to the very first introduction to a patient. So before the very first patient is exposed to a new drug, yes, typically there have been animals that have been exposed, so that if there is some unexpected safety issue, hopefully it will be recognized. The very earliest trials given new therapy typically are done at a very low dose. And typically in small numbers of patients. Sometimes it's just 3 patients, and then they'll wait a while and see if there are any side effects or untoward effects, and then maybe they'll raise the dose a little bit and do another 3 patients. And so it's a slow process to gradually develop an understanding of what the risks may be of using a particular new drug. What risks are acceptable really sort of depends on what is the disease being treated. If the disease being treated, let's say, is the common cold, we're not going to accept very much in terms of risk in a new therapy. So if there's toxicity, we're not going to be too happy about it. If, on the other hand, the drug is being developed to treat, let's say, an incurable cancer, we may be willing to accept more risk, more side effect, because without treatment, we know what's going to happen to a patient with an incurable cancer. So, there has to be a certain degree of judgment involved in making these decisions about whether to proceed onward or whether to terminate development of a particular new drug. By the time it gets to us, we're involved with later phases of development of new therapies. So by the time it gets to us, it's already been through most of these steps, including the initial phase 1 safety trials in patients. And we're generally more involved with trials that are going to look at the effectiveness of a new drug and or having a new drug compete with an existing therapy to determine which one might be better.
Guess what? Somehow we got to our first break already. I don't know how. So you're listening to Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. We'll be back in a few minutes.
You're listening to Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy and your hosts, pharmacists Paul White and Brad White. Remember, you can get more information right now by visiting medshoprx.com. That's medshop.rx.com. We'll be back with more of Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy in just a moment.
Hi, Paul White from the Medicine Center Pharmacy. From 1976 to the new year, 2020, we've been part of the Canton community. This year, we celebrate 44 years of service. Thank you for your business and continued support of the Medicine Center Pharmacies. A lot has changed in the pharmacy world over the past 44 years, but one thing hasn't: our commitment to your health. Stop by your local Medicine Center Pharmacy in Canton, Louisville, Minerva, or New Philadelphia, where wellness begins.
Mercy Medical Center wants you to know we are here for you literally and virtually. For our patient safety, Mercy is providing virtual doctor appointments from the comfort of your home. This service is available for staff care, urgent care, 7 days a week, and Mercy Primary Care Monday through Friday. See our website at cantonmercy.org/telehealth for office and appointment hours. Mercy telehealth visits are simple, convenient, and can be used by anyone who has access to a smartphone, tablet, or computer. Our Mercy representatives are ready and happy to assist you. So, whether you are in need of urgent care for minor illnesses and injuries or would like a one-on-one with a Mercy primary care physician, Mercy is here for you. Mercy Medical Center telehealth appointments. Learn more at cantonmercy.org/telehealth. That's cantonmercy.org/telehealth. Online appointments are considered medical services and will be billed to your insurance copays and deductibles apply.
Is CBD oil right for you? That may seem like a simple question, but the answers don't come from a convenience food store or a mall kiosk. Your Medicine Center pharmacist is the most accessible healthcare professional. Our pharmacists have been trained to provide expert CBD oil information to tailor therapies like CBD capsules, tinctures, lotions, and ointments to your particular need. We have the highest quality, organic, Colorado-grown, non-GMO, full-spectrum CBD oil products. Visit the Medicine Center pharmacies in Canton, Louisville, Minerva, or New Philadelphia. Hi, Paul White from the Medicine Center Pharmacy. In these difficult times, please stay calm and make sure your medical and healthcare supplies are well stocked. Have Kleenex, pain relievers, fever reducers such as Tylenol, and cough syrup like Robitussin, Dayquil, cough drops, and maybe a humidifier. And make sure you take a good multivitamin like Linus Pauling Super Multivitamins. Also, you might get a good probiotic, and make sure that you get plenty of rest and plenty of nutritious food. The Medicine Center Pharmacy in Canton, Louisville, Minerva, and New Philadelphia.
You're listening to News Talk 1480 WHBC and Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. Now here's your host, Paul White.
Welcome back to Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. Brad and I are discussing clinical trials with Dr. Mitchell Hott and Joan Kaufman, clinical trials nurse. So, Doctor, when I think about clinical trial, I think of people poking me with all kinds of needles and all that sort of thing. And what do you do to reassure people who, volunteer for these events?
So anytime we're running a clinical trial, there's going to be a informed consent process so that all of the requirements for participation are laid out and determined ahead of time. And so we really try to strive for no surprises. In participation in a clinical trial, there may be extra needle pokes and extra tests beyond what might be done at other times. And yes, that's so that the clinical trial can proceed. That's kind of an unavoidable, if you will. But it's not all downside. For some patients, of course, sometimes things are found on those extra tests that might not have been found otherwise. Patients also frequently experience, a sense of accomplishment and And they sometimes, feel good that they participated in the effort. Patients, even with an incurable cancer, want to see that treatment will improve, if not for themselves, for the people that follow them. Sometimes their future, patients may be their family members or their children or their grandchildren someday. And so, a lot of our patients want to help and make a contribution by participation, and this is how we move the field forward.
Can you give us any examples of trials that have revolutionized a treatment in any particular category of cancer care?
So, I can think of three recent triumphs, if you will. The most recent would be development of the two drugs, nivolumab and pembrolizumab, or what you see on TV commercials is Opdivo and Keytruda. These drugs are drugs that are considered immunotherapies for cancer, and so they recruit the patient's immune system to fight the cancer more effectively. There are probably over 1,000 different clinical trials for different forms of cancer at different stages and phases of disease that have used one or the other of these drugs. Just as an example, for patients with unfortunately incurable forms of lung cancer, without treatment, the average survival was somewhere around 6 months. With our previously available chemotherapies, we brought that up to about 12 months or so. And now by adding these immunotherapies and actually a little less chemotherapy and more of this immunotherapy, we've brought it up to average about 22 months. So it's not a cure. In the setting of incurable lung cancer, we haven't changed the outcome of that disease, but compared to no treatment, 6 months versus 22 months, it's a pretty vast difference. And of course, those are averages. So that would be one example. A second example is also an immunotherapy drug, is the drug called Herceptin. That's a drug that has taken a form of breast cancer that expresses the HER2 target on the breast cancer cells. And this immunotherapy attacks that target. And we've taken one of the most aggressive forms of breast cancer with essentially kind of the worst prognosis, and we've moved it up to having the best prognosis because of the effectiveness of this drug. That drug has been further developed whereby chemotherapy molecules have been attached to the drug, and we now have sort of new second-line drugs that are improving cure rates of breast cancer in women with HER2-positive disease. So that's really been remarkable achievement. And the third example would be Gleevec, which is a drug that has revolutionized chronic myelogenous leukemia, a disease in which patients typically were surviving only about 3.5 years on average, unless they had a bone marrow transplant. Now with that drug, we don't even know how long the average patient survives. 17 years after the trial was completed, we still have 75% of the patients alive. So that's become a vastly different disease. Hardly anyone gets a bone marrow transplant for chronic myelogenous leukemia anymore.
Oh man, that's neat. Joan, are you still awake?
I'm still here, yes.
Now, Joan Marshall's, tell me what exactly your responsibilities are.
At Mercy Medical Center, I work with our oncologists and our patients to help make sure that they're aware of the clinical trials that are available to them in our community. and help get the investigational treatments to them for their care.
In any given clinical trial, how many people what's a typical amount of people that would be involved?
It depends on the type of trial. We have treatment trials, we have device trials, we have blood donation type trials, questionnaire trials. So it depends also on the phase of trial, how large the patient population they're looking at. So it just varies. Trials come and go every year, and we could have several patients on one particular trial or multiple patients on a whole bunch of different trials. So it depends on their indication and what kind of treatment they're going to be getting.
Are all the trials structured the same way? And what I've always heard was you had a group of people who, shall we say, got a placebo, and you had a group of people who got the actual product to be tested. Is it all of them done that way?
They are not. Not all trials have placebos in them. Sometimes there might be comparing two different drugs, sort of like a head-to-head type trial. And then we do have some placebo trials because they're looking at offering patients the standard of care and looking at an investigational drug that might advance cancer treatment. So they might be offering an agent for the patient to take versus a placebo, because we want to learn about the side effects of the drug that the patients are taking. So they're not all structured the same.
I often thought about a clinical trial, and I thought, gee, I wouldn't want to be that person that doesn't get the real drug. I mean,
let me just comment or add to that. So a placebo might be used in a situation where there is no established effective therapy. One example might be in a patient who has completed all treatment for their colon cancer, and maybe we want to determine whether a drug might prevent a new colon cancer from developing down the line. We don't actually have any drug that can achieve that. So if there is a drug that's showing some promise that it might be able to achieve that, then half the patients at that point would be given a placebo, half the patients would be given the new drug. That would be one example of use of a placebo. Another example might be where there's an existing therapy and we're layering on the new drug on top of the existing therapy. So in that sort of a trial, all the patients will get the existing therapy. Half will get existing therapy plus placebo, half will get existing therapy plus active drug. So we're not actually withholding effective therapy from anybody.
I see. Okay. First break. Second break is here. News time. It is the bottom of the hour. We'll be back in a few minutes.
You're listening to Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy and your hosts, pharmacists Paul White and Brad White. Remember, you can get more information right now by visiting medshoprx.com. That's medshop.rx.com. We'll be back with more of Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy in just a moment.
WHBC AM 10, reliable as ever on News Talk 1480 WHBC.
From the News Talk 1480 WHBC newsroom, Attorney General Dave Yost says a state lawmaker who asked the court to order a county prosecutor to arrest Governor Mike DeWine for his handling of the coronavirus needs to be sanctioned. He called it a political stunt and says a sanction would deter others from doing something similar. It's official. The FDA is approving remdesivir as a treatment for COVID-19. Gilead Sciences announcing that the drug it first created to treat Ebola patients has now received official authorization. The FDA had previously granted emergency approval. Southwest ready to fill planes again, with middle seats only staying blocked through Thanksgiving. That means they'll be open for Christmas and New Year's travel. Only Delta and Alaska Airlines are reducing capacity through January 6th. A legal fight over ballot drop-off boxes in Ohio officially over now. That federal lawsuit that was filed by the NAACP of Ohio and the League of Women Voters was dropped yesterday. Ohio High School football playoff action week number 3. The All Care Stadium show and Sarshone Ford radio game of the week tonight is at Massillon as the Tigers host the Hoover Vikings. Our All Care TV game of the week, Dublin Scioto at Perry. Tomorrow night on the radio, it's Cleveland East Shaw at Northwest. And on the WHBCSports.com stream game, it is Central Catholic at Norwayne. More news coming up at 10 o'clock. I'm Pam Cook.
This hour's no-contact cash word is
Play. P-L-A-Y. Play.
Now go to WHBC.com to enter the word for your chance to win.
Mercy Medical Center wants you to know we are here for you literally and virtually. For our patient safety, Mercy is providing virtual doctor appointments from the comfort of your home. This service is available for stat care, urgent care, 7 days a week, and Mercy Primary Care Monday through Friday. See our website at cantonmercy.org/telehealth for office and appointment hours. Mercy telehealth visits are simple, convenient, and can be used by anyone who has access to a smartphone, tablet, or computer. Our Mercy representatives are ready and happy to assist you. So, whether you are in need of urgent care for minor illnesses and injuries or would like a one-on-one with a Mercy primary care physician, Mercy is here for you. Mercy Medical Center telehealth appointments. Learn more at cantonmercy.org/telehealth. That's cantonmercy.org/telehealth. Online appointments are considered medical services and will be billed to your insurance copays and deductibles apply.
Yes, we are open. We are open. The Medicine Center pharmacies and the Half Off on Out Buy store in Louisville are open. Some great services are still in play. Our drive-through windows, curb service, and our enhanced delivery service. Our stores are fully inventoried and fully staffed for your convenience. 13 pharmacists to help you with your medications and over-the-counter products. So don't hesitate to visit us or use one of our services. Medicine Center pharmacies in Canton, Louisville, New Philadelphia, and Minerva.
Brighten your day with beautiful stained glass from Studio Arts and Glass. Let the sun shine in through a stunning beveled glass window that forms a rainbow on your walls. Commission a piece of art to cherish for years. All at Studio Arts and Glass on Apple Grove and 77 in North Canton. Open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 6, or shop online at studioartsandglass.com. That's studioartsandglass.com.
Hi, Paul White from the Medicine Center Pharmacy. In these difficult times, please stay calm and make sure your medical and healthcare supplies are well stocked. Have Kleenex, pain relievers, fever reducers such as Tylenol, and cough syrup like Robitussin, Dayquil, cough drops, and maybe a humidifier. And make sure you take a good multivitamin like Linus Pauling Super Multivitamins. Also, you might get a good probiotic, and make sure that you get plenty of rest and plenty of nutritious food. The Medicine Center Pharmacy in Canton, Louisville, Minerva, and New Philadelphia.
Your severe weather station, News Talk 1480 WHBC.
Here's your AccuWeather forecast. Freezing warm weather continuing this afternoon with temperatures approaching the record set in 1920 with a mix of clouds and sunshine and a high of 77. Watch for a strong thunderstorm tonight, which can bring hail and damaging winds. Low this evening, 46. And tomorrow and Sunday both will be mostly cloudy. High on Saturday, 50. High on Sunday, 51. We'll have a bit of rain in the morning on Monday. I'm Holly Holdren for News Talk 1480 WHBC.
You're listening to News Talk 1480 WHBC and Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. Now here's your host, Paul White.
Welcome back to Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. Today we are talking with Dr. Mitchell Haupt, MD, hematology specialist and medical oncologist for Mercy Hematology and Oncology Associates, a long sentence, and Joan Kaufman, RN, clinical trials nurse.
Okay, if you're considering participating in a clinical trial, how should you prepare for meeting with the research coordinator or doctor?
I always let patients know to make sure that they write down their concerns and their questions before coming to the appointment and bring that list with them, as well as a family member. And if they can't bring a family member, bring a friend just to have an extra set of ears, and bring paper and pen to that appointment or a notebook so that someone or yourself or whoever you bring can write down what the doctor and research nurse coordinator are telling you.
Do patients continue to work with their primary care physician during a clinical trial?
Absolutely. The oncologists, they're going to treat your cancer and watch over that area. But the medical conditions that a patient has, they still need to continue to see their primary care doctor.
Okay. One fear that people have is that they may not get adequate treatment on a clinical trial. You know, we talked about this a little bit before the break, but do you have anything else to comment on with respect to if they are looking to get a cancer treatment and they're concerned about maybe getting a less effective treatment for the therapy? Is there something they should be anxious about, or is that an opportunity to have a discussion with the coordinators of the trial?
So, one thing that patients should understand is that we're available if they have questions at virtually at any time. So when they have a meeting with us about clinical trials, the end of that meeting is not necessarily the end of the discussion. If they have additional questions and so forth, we can schedule additional meetings or phone calls and put their concerns to rest and, you know, address all the issues that they may be raising. But when it comes to clinical trials, and by the way, almost all, if not all, of the clinical trials that we've been doing are multi-institutional trials, typically at either dozens or even hundreds of hospitals around the country, sometimes around the world. And so these are all coordinated and have multiple layers of sort of safety built in. Most of the, I would say all these trials require FDA approval to even run the trial. Each hospital participating has responsibilities for an institutional review board to evaluate the ethics and the scientific merit of the trial. Once the trial is underway, in addition to the investigators performing the trial, there is a separate group of experts that form the Data Monitoring Safety Committee. And as data is coming in, this group is only responsible for evaluating safety, and they are keeping track of side effects and anything unexpected. They're going to evaluate, and they may put a stop to a trial at any time based on what they see. Occasionally, they may see that a treatment is so overwhelmingly effective that it's not ethical to continue the trial anymore. The question has been answered, and it's not ethical to give people something other than the new drug, for example. We'd like to see that happen more often, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Also, the investigators have to be credentialed. And so there are annual educational programs that we have to participate in that review ethics and scientific principles of running clinical trials. Many of the, if not all, of the major drug companies that are developing new drugs, at some point when we're getting into the later phases of clinical trials, they will utilize clinical trial intermediaries. And so these are companies that are in the business of running clinical trials. They don't really have a vested interest in the outcome. Their interest is in collecting high quality data that is verifiable and accurate. And that's how they establish their own quality of their work product. And so there's that level of sort of reduced interest in, showing a favorable outcome. And that type of organizational structure really adds legitimacy to the results of a trial. Patients should also remember that participation is completely voluntary. They're not required to be in a clinical trial, even if they express interest in it. And even if they enroll in a clinical trial, they're permitted to quit anytime they like. That doesn't mean that they will lose their doctor or no longer be taken care of. It's just that for whatever reason, they don't want to be in the trial anymore. Maybe the requirements for participation are too substantial, or maybe they had a side effect of some sort. So if something, isn't working out well for a given individual, they're not required to, see it through to the very end of the trial. Every trial does not include a non-treatment option if there is an effective option available. So, because it wouldn't be ethical.
I appreciate that lengthy explanation, because I had a patient in the store a few weeks ago that was educated by their primary care provider that there could be a study that they might be able to participate in. And the patient was a little on guard because they felt, they gave me an analogy that they didn't want to be in Dr. Frankenstein's lab. And I was trying to reassure them that that's not the case. And I appreciate you documenting all those checks and balances and safety procedures. And it's not, the goal is not to put the patient at risk. And I just thought that was interesting that you detail all those things that are in place to help not only make the trial successful and accountable, but also keep the patient safe too. So why is it important to have good representation of a variety of ages and races in a clinical trial?
We know that men and women and different ages and different races can respond different to cancer treatment. For some cancers, it can be very aggressive. And just for an example, African American women, sometimes they're more likely to have very aggressive breast cancer, and we don't know why. So we're conducting clinical trials and having a good variety in hopes that we can find better ways to combat their cancer.
So all these folks that are enrolled in clinical trial, I assume that you don't take all their regular meds away from them. They get regular treatment, all that sort of thing, to, I guess, continue to improve their life. How do you fence those drugs with the clinical trial product?
So most of the time, the new drugs have been analyzed for drug interactions with the most common drugs. And so there will be some clinical trials that will not permit patients taking particular therapies to enroll for fear of drug interaction problems. But it's important to bear in mind that drugs are being developed to help real-world patients across the board. And patients take other drugs. They have other diseases. We need to develop therapies that are going to work in such situations. If we run a clinical trial where we want picture-perfect specimens, that won't be a very useful trial. It won't really prove too much because we don't encounter such patients very often where they have one and only one problem and have no other medicines and everything is just absolutely perfect. So that's part of what makes drug development challenging.
So what you're saying is that just about everybody's eligible to participate in a clinical trial.
Well, not entirely.
Okay.
We would like that to be the case, but there are some situations where it's not always so easy to enroll everyone. So, for example, sometimes we have a patient who has more than one cancer, or they've had a recent cancer and now they have a second different cancer. Those patients are often not included in many clinical trials because it makes interpretation of the outcome of the trial difficult. If you're doing, let's say, a lung cancer trial and your patient also has leukemia and the patient runs into problems, you sometimes won't know why? Was it their disease? And then which one? And it just complicates interpretation of results. And it's important to recognize that when we don't offer participation to a given patient, we're not we are withholding the opportunity to be in the trial, but we're not withholding proven effective therapy. Because once a therapy is proven effective, it's no longer in the clinical trial. It's no longer, the clinical trials have already been done. So, a clinical trial involves evaluation of treatment that's not yet proven. So it is ethical not to offer an unproven therapy to everyone. And also, the clinical trials typically are going to address sort of a particular cancer scenario. So in order to kind of get meaningful results in a relatively reasonably short period of time, you have to have some focus. So, for example, if a treatment trial is looking at patients with a stage 3 colon cancer, and your patient turns out to have stage 4 disease, then we can't offer them that particular clinical trial. We may have a different trial for them, but we can't quite get everyone into every trial.
Okay, our final break is here. You're listening to Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy.
You're listening to Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy and your hosts, pharmacists Paul White and Brad White. Remember, you can get more information right now by visiting medshoprx.com. That's medshop.rx.com. We'll be back with more of Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy in just a moment.
Yes, we are open. We are open. The Medicine Center pharmacies and the Half Off and Out By store in Louisville are open. Some great services are still in play. Our drive-through windows, curb service, and our enhanced delivery service. Our stores are fully inventoried and fully staffed for your convenience. 13 pharmacists to help you with your medications and over-the-counter products. So don't hesitate to visit us or use one of our services. Medicine Center pharmacies in Canton, Louisville, New Philadelphia, and Minerva. Is CBD oil right for you? That may seem like a simple question, but the answers don't come from a convenience store or a mall kiosk. Your Medicine Center pharmacist is the most accessible healthcare professional. Our pharmacists have been trained to provide expert CBD oil information to tailor therapies like CBD capsules, tinctures, lotions, and ointments to your particular need. We have the highest quality, organic, Colorado-grown, non-GMO, full-spectrum CBD oil products. Visit the Medicine Center pharmacies in Canton, Louisville, Minerva, or New Philadelphia. Hi, Paul White from the Medicine Center Pharmacy. In these difficult days, please stay calm and make sure your medical and healthcare supplies are well stocked. Make sure you have Kleenex, acetaminophen or Tylenol, ibuprofen or Advil, Mucinex, Robitussin or Dayquil, cough drops, maybe even a humidifier or a vaporizer. You can also just turn the shower on hot and sit in the bathroom breathing in the steam. How about vitamin D and a probiotic? And a good multivitamin like Linus Pauling Super Multivitamins that you'll find only in the Medicine Center pharmacies. So take care of yourselves and don't stress about the coronavirus. Make sure you get plenty of rest and plenty of healthy food. Medicine Center Pharmacy, Canton, Louisville, Minerva, and New Philadelphia.
Are you tired of spending time sorting your medication? Hi, pharmacist Paul White for the Medicine Center Pharmacy. Whether you are a caregiver or personally take medications, our pill packets will change how you take your medication forever. Instead of multiple pill bottles, you'll want to receive one easy dispensing box that contains all of your medications in individual packets. Organized by date, time, with instructions clearly labeled, it's simple, convenient, and safe. Call or stop by your local Medicine Center pharmacies in Canton, Louisville, Minerva, and New Philadelphia, where wellness begins.
You're listening to News Talk 1480 WHBC and Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. Now here's your host, Paul White.
Thanks for listening today to Health Matters. This morning we are speaking with Dr. Mitchell Hout, MD from Mercy Medical Center, and RN Joan Kaufman. So let's get back to the final segment of the show.
Do patients get to decide their treatment on the clinical trial?
So it's relatively infrequent that that will be the case. Most of the clinical trials are going to be randomized, and so that's one of the things that's usually well delineated in the consent process and the consent form, that in fact they will typically be randomized to one treatment or another, and it's not by their choice, it's by random allocation. There are occasionally clinical trials where the randomization will be between a new drug versus the existing standard of care. And when it comes to the existing standard of care, sometimes there may be a few different options, in which case, in that situation, patients who are randomized to standard of care may choose between the existing standard of care options.
Okay. You know, we're running kind of short on time, so I wanted to maybe skip a couple things we've touched on already, but I thought it might be important to ask if insurance companies cover clinical trial patients, or how does that work for them?
Yes, they should, but we always advise patients to check with their insurance company just for that, confirmation. But the standard of care treatment, like doctor visits, labs, scans, that's all going to be billed to the patient's insurance. But the investigational drugs, those would be provided to the patient free of charge if it was a treatment trial.
Okay. Cancer treatment can be difficult. What other additional challenges might a patient experience from enrolling in a clinical trial?
The challenges wouldn't be any different than patients that are not on a trial. Patients are going to experience treatment side effects. There might be some financial concerns. Transportation issues might be a worry. They could be afraid and also concerned with work or just being lonely in general. So those are just challenges that anyone could face with a diagnosis of cancer.
So let's say a patient starts a clinical trial and decides that, well, I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe they're halfway through it, or the drugs have been administered multiple times. What does Mercy Medical Center do to support these individuals if they do quit the program?
That has happened, and we are just grateful for the time that they were able to contribute to the trial progress. We remind patients all the time that a clinical trial is voluntary and you can change your mind at any time. We just ask our patients to make sure that they do it safely and inform the research coordinator and the doctor so that we can move forward to the next options.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think it's best if they do tell us, so that if there are any safety concerns, we can at least continue to monitor and provide care for any toxicity issues that may have arisen or may arise in the future.
So let's say in a clinical trial, you do discover other types of cancer or multiple types of cancer. Well, what would be the next move here? Would you take them out of the clinical trial, or?
It kind of depends on the trial. The other important thing to recognize about patients leaving a clinical trial is that the fact that a patient leaves the trial is important data in and of its own right. So if you're developing a new treatment and only half the people can stick with it, it's so terrible that half the people quit the therapy. That's important to know as well. It's not just how effective was the treatment, it's also how difficult is the treatment. After all, how will you get patients down the line once you actually, let's say, get a drug approved? How will you get them to take it if it's so difficult to stay with it? So these are all important outcomes to actually be aware of and to record. So just being in the trial, and even if you quit, that provides a service as well.
So what other benefits could a patient experience in enrolling in a clinical trial? Other than what we talked about, discovery perhaps of other types of cancer, that sort of thing.
So For the patients, sometimes there's, this sense of satisfaction of having participated. Sometimes it's the early, they get the earliest feedback about their treatment, and they get additional attention because, as we were saying earlier, they may have to have additional needle pokes or what have you, but they also, get some more time with our clinical trial staff, and sometimes that can be very supportive for them. Oftentimes people who are dealing with a diagnosis of cancer, they just want to talk about their experience and what they're going through. And our clinical trial staff have an awful lot of experience and knowledge, about those situations, and can provide them with a lot of emotional and psychological support as well.
Do patients get the results from the trial they're participating in?
They don't always get to learn the results of the study. Trials can actually be a very lengthy process when we're studying a new drug. However, patients who are enrolled on a trial, if there is information and updates why they're getting treatment that we need to share with them, maybe it's a new side effect profile, we do share that with them while they're going through their treatment.
How can someone find out more about cancer or clinical trials or get support for a cancer-related issue?
Patients can always call Mercy Cancer Center, and their phone number is 330-430-2788.
Any closing comments you'd like to leave with our listeners before we wrap up today?
So I think it's the important lesson here is that clinical trials is a very ethical process, and it also helps really facilitate cancer advancements. It also helps disprove at times when there's a therapy that isn't as good as it was supposedly advertised to be. And one important example of that was years ago, we were doing bone marrow transplantation for patients with breast cancer. And it was through the clinical trials process that we showed that that wasn't as effective as it was originally thought. And now that's no longer done.
Wow. Well, guess what? We're out of time. We'd love to have more time to discuss more issues and more things with you, but gee, how wonderful it is that you're doing the work that you're doing. So thank you to our guest, Dr. Mitchell Hout, MD, is a hematology specialist and medical oncologist for Mercy Hematology and Oncology Associates, and Joan Kaufman, RN, clinical trials nurse. We would like to remind our listeners, if you suspect you have a medical issue, please contact your healthcare provider. Thanks to our sponsors, Mercy Medical Center, Studio Arts and Glass, and of course, our technical producer, JD DeAngelis. As always, we thank you, listeners, for joining us on Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy. Have a healthy week, and we'll see you right here next Friday on News Talk 1480 WHBC. And thank you
for joining us for this edition of Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy and your hosts, your pharmacists, Paul White and Brad White. Remember, you can get more information right now at medshoprx.com. That's MEDSHOPRX.com. Be sure to join us next Friday at this time for Health Matters with the Medicine Center Pharmacy.
Joan, you still there?